Well, hello and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I am so psyched that you are hanging out with me today. So let me start by asking you a question. When you're upset about something, do you go directly to that person, or might you send them a passive-aggressive text? Or maybe you'll slam the door instead. Or maybe you'll talk about them to other people instead of talking about them directly to their face. If you're nodding your head yes, then this episode is for you, because I am breaking down the top 10 indicators that you might be suppressing and or repressing, which would be unconscious, your anger. So if you're new to my channel, hey, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here. Please introduce yourself in the comments below, because we are a friendly group, and make sure that you subscribe to, all you have to do is just hit that thing that says subscribe, and I hit the bell so you get notified whenever I do something new. If you don't know me, my name is Terri Cole, and I'm the author of Boundary Boss. There it is, which you can get at boundarybossbook.com. And I want to say thank you so much for all of your questions and the comments that you leave, because I read every single one. And then I love to highlight it, which I'm going to do right now. So I got a comment from Robin Lynn on the Andrea Owen interview that I did. And she said, thank you so much for this interview and for this guest being so open and honest. God bless you both. You are helping people. Thank you. So you're welcome, Robin Lynn. Thank you for being a part of my crew. Before we get started, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you get notified anytime I do a new episode. And if you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up. All right, so let's talk about anger, shall we? What I find from being a psychotherapist for almost 25 years is that a lot of people have a lot of problems with their own anger. So there's a difference between suppressing and repressing our anger, but they equate to kind of the same thing, which is that we are not expressing our anger. So this is repressed anger, is stuff that we are unconsciously avoiding or denying, right? We're pushing it down. So this could contribute to mental health problems, anxiety, depression, and really, if it goes untreated, it can also cause self-sabotaging tendencies in your life. So it's really important that we recognize that anger is a healthy part of being a human being, and that none of us has the power to say we're never going to be angry. And yet I can tell you that in my 20s, I was definitely the person who was like, I never get angry, because my anger was so repressed that I had no idea how angry I really was, because there's many reasons why. If you're doing this too, if you don't like your own anger, I don't like anyone's anger, no, other people, my own, but I didn't realize what was happening, and that it was really to the detriment of my well-being, right? Not being able to talk about it. So let's talk about the different signals, the signs, the characteristics of suppressing or repressing anger, so that you can see, do you see yourself in this? The first one, and I really identified with this myself, was it's sort of emotion swapping, where you don't feel angry pretty much ever, at least not consciously, but you often feel sad or depressed. Because what I learned growing up and in my childhood was that anger was not okay. Anybody's anger was not okay, but that it was okay if I were sad or upset. So I had to unconsciously sort of transmute my anger into sadness in order for me to accept it myself, but also in order to not be rejected within the family system. So maybe if you're having that experience too, know that, this is a full-on sign of suppressing or repressing your anger is really not feeling it, but feeling other emotions in its place. Another sign is being super sarcastic. Because when you think about sarcasm, it is like a hidden or sneaky or underhanded way that we are getting our anger out. I was the queen of sarcasm because it was a safe way of expressing the anger. And I want you to think about, Freud talked back in the 1910 talked about anger as human beings, like being pot-bellied stoves. Let's just say we were like a furnace that is run by wood, and our emotions are the smoke. And so by thinking that we could never feel anger, it's like stuffing a bunch of stuff down the flue where the smoke goes and thinking that that will make the smoke disappear. Now we know, if you've ever lit a fire and if you've ever closed that flue, the smoke doesn't go away, right? It just goes out every nook and cranny. So what happens emotionally is that we're shutting down our anger, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and those emotions are now going out every nook and cranny. So meaning it's coming out sideways. So it's hard enough to understand ourselves emotionally. So suppressing or repressing our anger makes it twice as hard, 3 times as hard. So think about it. You know, whichever ones of these symptoms I'm talking about, if they identify with you, write them down. I created a downloadable guide for you, so you don't have to take notes if you don't want to, but you'll really get an idea of what are you doing? How are you relating to your own anger? Are you super sarcastic? That could be one indicator. And what about being conflict avoidant? Being uncomfortable with confrontation, but also avoiding it. Because part of why I was conflict avoidant in my 20s and in my teens was that I was afraid of other people's anger. I was afraid if I got into it with someone that something really, really bad was going to happen, because I never learned how to manage my own anger, and I never had good modeled behavior in my home. I mean, of course, in therapy, I eventually learned how to deal with it. But avoiding conflict is major. And being uncomfortable around conflict, even if you're not involved in it, is also an indicator. The next symptom of suppressed or repressed anger is having control issues, really wanting and needing to control many, many things in your life and things that are not yours to control. But again, it's like a safety issue. You might be overly controlling. You might have rigid boundaries, right? In this respect, if you're overly controlling, because again, it's like a safety issue. Another indication is being passive aggressive when you interact with others. So that's sort of, this is building on the sarcasm point. But being passive aggressive, we also can act this out in many different ways. So if we're angry at someone because they didn't respond to us in a timely fashion, let's say you're texting with someone or whatever, when they do get back, maybe you wait an extra long time to get back to them because you want to make sure that your message is clear. Of course, your message is vague as hell. If that's how you're getting your message across, you might as well be using a smoke signal. But it's in our minds. It's like our ego mind like tricks us into thinking that we're doing something. And also being passive aggressive is a way of feeling safe and still honoring your feelings, but it's so ineffective, right? So it's something that if you're aware that you're doing it, there's so many better ways of communicating your displeasure than being passive aggressive. The next thing is you might be a boundary disaster. So that can include having super rigid boundaries, as I said before, where you're so in control of things, or having difficulty setting boundaries altogether, right? Having too porous boundaries, saying yes when you want to say no. This can also be because you are suppressing or repressing your anger, and people are afraid. You're afraid to say no, because again, we're trying to avoid other people's anger as well. Okay, another indication is shutting down. So if you're upset, if your go-to move is to be withdrawn in anger, to isolate yourself from others, right? Instead of talking about it, it's you literally remove yourself from the situation and shut down. Another indication could be you wait so long and so long and so long to say that you're angry about something, that by the time you do, you're a volcano. So you wait you wait, you say nothing, you avoid, you are withdrawn, and then it just happens where you explode like a volcano. And again, that's like, leaving bodies in your wake, because people do not see that coming a lot of times, especially if you're someone who is anger avoidant. They don't see you that way, and then suddenly you just like lose it. And what happens is, because there's a cumulative effect emotionally, that there really is a cost for continuing to push it down, because it builds and builds and builds. And a lot of times people will act out. There are other things that we do to numb our feelings if we are not dealing with our feelings. I mean, before I didn't stop drinking until I was in my early 20s. But the way that I managed a lot of my emotions that I didn't know how to manage, especially anger, was by drinking. Because I was so seeking to numb the feelings I just didn't know how to handle. I didn't know how to have a hard conversation with someone when I was younger. I felt justified in my anger, but it scared me. My own anger scared me, and other people's anger scared me. I actually remember having a conversation with my college boyfriend, and I was like, kind of like, I don't do anger. And he's like, what? What does that even mean? I was like, it's like not my thing. And he's like, okay, but are you saying I can never be angry? I was like, yes, pretty much. And he's like, I don't know that I can like never get angry. And he was actually very healthy emotionally, which is so funny that, of course, I was drawn to his unabashed relationship to his anger. He wasn't an angry person, but he also wasn't afraid to be angry. And I remember I was desperately, talk about controlling, I wanted to warn him that, I did warn him that if there were any outbursts of anger, that I would probably end the relationship. And he was like, wow, okay, well, I'll do my best, but I don't know. I mean, and eventually, because he was a trustworthy person and we were together for many years, he was able to talk to me when he was angry without exploding or terrifying me. And I was able to accept that anger, but that took time. I mean, can you imagine being in a relationship with someone who's like, P.S., this is, here's the rule before you can get into this relationship with me is you can never be angry. Person's like, hi, I don't think that's possible, but I'll try. Yeah, we can't. We cannot control that to that level, but I really did try. Another indication of suppressed anger is holding grudges, where you really have that file cabinet of grievances and you remember who did what bad, crappy thing to you when. It's almost like, because we don't let go of the anger at the time, we put it away in this anger file cabinet, but it's never really gone. Because it's like you think of that person and you're like, oh yeah, that's the one who screwed me on that thing. When we actually talk things out, when we confront people, when we allow ourselves to be angry, you are much less likely to have that file cabinet of grievances where you'll find yourself ruminating about things that happened yesterday or things that happened 25 years ago, right? This is just an exercise in just bashing your skull against a wall, because when you're ruminating about something that really got you mad, but you never got any satisfaction because you never talked to the person about it, and even if talking to them wouldn't have been satisfying, meaning they wouldn't have understood, there is definitely something healing and healthy in saying, I'm angry about this. I don't like the way that you treated me or the way that you spoke to me. I won't tolerate that behavior or whatever it is that you're saying that you're angry about. But think about every time that you relive that in your mind. Like, your body doesn't know the difference, right? Your mind is so in HD, so to speak, that you're still releasing those stress hormones. That cortisol, that adrenaline is still, so you're still getting the negative impact of an incident that could have happened 20 years ago. So we don't want to be doing that. We need a healthy outlet for the anger. And then the last one is feeling guilty, ashamed, or bad when you are angry. Like, really having it be an emotion that makes you feel bad about yourself for having it. Again, so much of this has to do with the families we grew up in, what we learned, if it was considered ungodly to be angry, if it was just unacceptable, like it was in my family. It wasn't a religious thing. It was just not what we did. It was considered unseemly, like it was crass. And no one even had to tell me that, right, you guys? This is just, you just know it. Nobody has to send a memo to you about the system, the family system, and the rules of engagement, because we have all of these silent agreements in the families that we grew up in. But nobody needed to tell me that. I just knew that. And there was nobody who was doing that intentional either. It isn't like either one of my parents wanted that to be the case, right? It just was the case because they didn't have the skills to handle their own anger. And then, of course, listen, we can only talk it out or act it out. So trust me, if you are suppressing or unconsciously repressing your anger, it's coming out because you do not have the power to make it not, or it's going in and will make you sick, depressed, anxious, stress, filled with stress. There's so many down things. So anyway, I hope that this was helpful. In the guide, I'm going to give you a couple of things that you can do to let some of this anger out, but I want to hear from you. Do you have this problem? Does this resonate with you? Does this make sense to you? Leave me a comment here. If you like this episode, please share it in all the places that we share it, because hopefully, you guys know, my desire is to just uplift as many people as possible, right? More joy, less suffering is where it's at in my book. So don't forget to subscribe to whether it's the podcast, whether you are watching this on YouTube, so that you don't miss a thing. And as always, take care of you.